This is an image of the Greek god of the soul, Psyche. And noticed that the Psyche is one of the gods of the ancient Greeks. Psyche is cradling the light of the heart uh, in her hands. And that's key in terms of understanding the soul, because the soul, for those of you who have been working in the whole brain living book, the soul is found in the right brain as well as the heart. Uh, and so we're looking at that part of our consciousness, the heart and the soul. And so she's cradling the heart. The blue butterfly appears at the throat chakra, which is that blue color. And the butterfly is a symbol of transformation. You know how a sort of a caterpillar that's interested in two things, food and sex, turns into something else and actually can take wings. So it's got to dissolve, though, it's got to dissolve in the cocoon, and then it can actually come out and take wing. And so even the creepiest situation can be turned into beauty and into flight, you know. So the butterfly is always a symbol of the soul. Now, in all traditions, this is just sort of preview before we get to be talking about how Carl Jung dealt with this. In all traditions, the soul is considered to be feminine. In the Latin, it's anima. And anima is the root of the soul, is the root of becoming animated. To touch, to be in touch with your soul is to be animated or alive. But it's always feminine, as every one of us, no matter who we are, came out of a mother. You see, uh, the part of consciousness that's the soul is also the part of consciousness that's directed inward and can contact wisdom, also feminine in most traditions. In Greek, wisdom is Sophia. So we've got anima, Sophia. We're dealing with the feminine when we're dealing with the soul. When you're dealing with the intellect, uh, reason, and whatnot, you're dealing with the masculine, which would be called animus. Okay. Now, psychology literally means the study of the soul. And we've gone far away from that where we are now. The psychology, a lot of times, can be skillful, uh, can be working with the soul, but a lot of times it's working with meds. Uh, so psychology literally means the study of the soul, and philosophy literally means the lover of wisdom, Sophia, and philo is love. And so these are a couple of the great traditions. And we're going to really look at a pioneer of depth psychology today. We're going to look at Carl Gustav Jung, um, the great, along with Freud, the two guys who really started depth psychology. In other words, psychology that took into account the unconscious. That's why they're called depth psychologists. They weren't just working with the left brain and that part of consciousness. They said, actually, most of our behavior and a lot of our actions and thoughts and whatever is actually being triggered by something that's below the surface. As a matter of fact, it's in the shadow realm, as they both talked about. So we're going to work with Carl Jung today. He really did have a language of soul. Freud did too, but Jung, I think, it connects with um, the spirit, connects with the work we're doing here. So a little bit of biography on Jung. He was born in the middle of the 19th century, 1847, in Basel, Switzerland. Basel was the cultural center of Switzerland. Um, might as well go right to a really interesting thing. At age 12, he had a vision. He was walking through the square near the cathedral of Basel, this shiny new cathedral, and he had a vision above the cathedral of God on a golden throne, and then dropping down from the golden throne was an enormous turd. These are Jung's words, an enormous turd, and it crashed into the cathedral and just broke down. Like I said, the walls were asunder, and he just, so this enormous turd coming from heaven flattened the Cathedral of Basel. Now that was so shocking to him to have this vision that he really repressed it into his shadow for 50 years. It was 50 years before he actually could face it. I mean, his father was a minister, and who do you tell a kind of vision like that? When you're 12, but he had it, and he repressed it. But then when I first met Jung, was in the great books. I had read a book by Freud on our reading list. And then there's also Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, which was a late book. It was when he was 62, I think, that he might have written that. He was certainly in his 60s. It took him 50 years to actually put in this vision. And I remember reading it back at Notre Dame, the enormous turd vision. Well, we can parse that later, but it was something about, he felt that the structures of the church were coming to an end. There was a bit of that, but well, more on that later, perhaps. 20 years after that vision, when he was around 32, he met Sigmund Freud in Vienna. Freud was 20 years older than he was and had started this whole experiment of looking into the unconscious. And of course, both men used dreams, etc. And the first time they met, they talked for 13 hours. It was like the father had met his son. They were very close. They worked closely in Vienna for, the 6 years that they were together. But then at the end of the 6 years, they had a real break. And the break was on the vision of the soul. This is too much of a generalization, but just for our purposes here, basically, Freud thought that the soul was motivated by sex and aggression. He thought that was the motivating force that was coming up, and so that was his image of the soul, was sex and aggression. And Jung didn't think that. By that time they broke, because Jung had another vision. But that was really where they broke, on the vision of what was the soul. Sex and aggression was, if you know Freud, it's all about sex and aggression. And it's sort of, we're living in a world that's living in that view of sex and aggression, really macho kind of view. Now, I want to talk about the second layer. I want to talk after the biography. I want to talk about Jung's vision of the soul. It was different than Freud's, and they just couldn't. They couldn't bring them together. Not that Freud's wrong, but they just parted, and it was a rough time for Jung, because it was just right around the start of the First World War, when everything seems to be falling apart. Another enormous turd was hitting Europe here. But Jung, his view was that the soul was drawn or motivated by longing for the spirit. Very different view than motivation by sex and aggression, a longing for the spirit. He thought soul is our essence and our eternal likeness of the divine within us. So it was a very different view than Freud. And he was out in the wilderness himself, because he was going to other traditions, religious traditions, to find correlation with this theory. But he thought that the soul was really a microcosm of the universe in human beings, and just a little form of it. But it was definitely the divine within us. Uh, he thought the soul was the animating force of the universe. Okay. And you know, when you if you watched any of the Star Wars movies, especially the early ones, you know, that's the force. I mean, George Lucas was stealing from everybody, from Joseph Campbell, of course, and for all the myths. But he had the idea when there's a key part in the first. Well, it's one, two, three. I guess it's the fourth one, but it's the first one anybody saw. Luke's trying to take his X-wing fighter into the Death Star and put a torpedo in to blow it up, and he's got this computer there, which is the left brain, of course, and he hears the word from dead Obi-Wan Kenobi, says, Luke, trust the force, trust the force. And so he shifts off his computer, his left brain. Now he's going with the right brain, with the soul, the animating force. The force there is, he's talking about shifting brains, shifting from the left brain to the right brain. Luke, trust the force. Well, everybody freaks out, when they say he turned off his computer. Yeah, earlier on when he's learning to fight with the lightsaber, they put the helmet over him so he can't see, and he has to learn. They say, trust the force, trust the force. So this is the force they're talking about is what Jung thought was a soul, our very center. Jedis are in touch with it, but we all have it. We all have it. Now, the third thing we're talking about here is uh, his real view of the soul journey, because he thinks the soul is the center of the human being, and it brings in the entire universe. Okay, it's our connection with the entire universe. If you understand whole brain living that we've been looking at in terms of having a left brain and having a right brain, we got plenty of left brain. The left brain's destroying the planet in a way. Okay, it's brought a lot of great things like Zoom sometimes, as long as the signal holds. All that's left brain stuff, but then the right brain's been neglected, and so that's why we're going to be working with the right brain. Has our heart and soul. So heart, soul, spirit. What's the connection of those three? Well, if you can consider the soul as our unique version of the spirit. Okay, well, the heart fits in sort of like everybody understands this term, I think, sort of like Bluetooth. The heart is there to connect our individual, unique um, uh, essence of the spirit with the larger picture, with the spirit. The spirit is the universe in this view. Uh, and so the heart functions sort of like Bluetooth. You can pair it up. Right now, my printer's not paired with my computer, and so I can't print anything. And I'm got to mess around with the Bluetooth connection. That's ultimately how you can hear me in France. Yeah, see, or wherever you are. So now the journey of the soul is a journey to wholeness and healing for Jung. And this was a key thing when I finally absorbed it. I didn't absorb that much of memory, dreams, and reflection. I had like 16 books to read in a semester, and who was this guy Jung? And it was pretty superficial. Since then, uh, uh, he's one of my favorites now, but I just, school, you don't have time to go deep, even though you're reading the great books. This journey to wholeness. And he says at one point, and I didn't catch it. It wasn't in the memories, dreams, and reflection, but it was the whole drift of it. That this journey to wholeness and healing, um, it's a journey to wholeness, not perfection. Perfection is something of the left brain, and it's not. You can be perfect on the time and space things, but you can't be perfect with a life. So that's a key thing. Also reflects that line of the Gospel of Matthew, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect, was the translation we got from Aramaic to Latin to Elizabethan English. But In Aramaic, it's to be whole as the universe is whole. That's the best rendering from the Aramaic. And boy, Jesus knew that too. Jesus and Jung have a connection here. So it's about wholeness. Now, the greatest obstacle to wholeness, this is important. This is the way we're often working. It's how the Enneagram works. It shows you, if you're one on the Enneagram or you're five on the Enneagram, that just shows you your left brain kind of defensive shield. Okay. Uh, and it's what gets in the way of actually finding out your deeper essence. It's not who you are. So that's why you should never think you're a number or you're not your survival operating system. Okay, that's the ego. And so Jung thought that was the greatest obstacle to discovering who you really were, was especially the shadow side of ego, that it gets in the way. And that's important to see what gets in the way. I mean, if you got a candle here and here we are, that's what the shadow means. You're obstructing the light. Okay. He said in one of his books, he said we should celebrate a last supper for the ego again and again. What an interesting image. He said, you really got to celebrate a last supper for the ego. And if you know about the Last Supper, uh, Jesus flipped everything around. He blew everybody's mind because the guys came up for this Last Supper, and they didn't know it was the Last Supper that they were going to have with Jesus for a while, but and he started right away washing their feet, and Peter's, said, "No, you're not washing my feet. I should be washing your feet." And he said, "No, no, I'm washing your feet." He's demonstrating this kind of hokey pokey, that religious hokey pokey, because they thought he was the master. Okay, and so he said, "I'm going to wash your feet." Uh-huh. And that is a kind of image there of what we have to do with the entire ego. You don't have to get rid of your ego. There's a lot of teaching about that. Well, I don't recommend it. Besides the fact that it's impossible, but it's not good. We need both. We need the ego. We need the heart and soul. We need both because I had to use my ego to try to get back connected here. Okay, so no, the ego needs to learn to become the servant of the soul. This is an essential hokey pokey. Don't have to get rid of it. You have to actually learn how to love it, both the character one and character two of your ego consciousness. Character one is the logical, it's a problem solver, you got will and the power to push through things. That's good. The shadow self holds all of our wounds and traumas and whatever. It can get in the way, though. It can get in the way. It's always trying to keep us safe. Both parts. The shadow really wants to keep us safe. That's why it keeps telling you, "Don't do that. Don't do that." No. Well, it's not always wrong, you know, but it needs to be the servant of the soul. So we're doing a kind of hokey pokey. We're turning things around, and mostly, try to talk to try to talk to my grandson who's 17 about the soul. He has no vocabulary. He thinks, Aretha Franklin. Well, yeah, okay, but there's the Queen of Soul, but it's much more than that. But they don't have a vocabulary. You can't see the reality of something unless you have the vocabulary, you see. But this is what he means about the Last Supper for the ego. And he said you got to do it again and again. Before you know it, your ego is running the show again, rather than being the servant of the soul and the heart that's connected to the big picture, you see. We need both. Jesus is wise about that. And so were the gospel writers, because they included this little vignette where Jesus is hanging out in Bethany just before really the last days. They would go to Bethany as a kind of safe house when things got too hot in Jerusalem. And he's at Bethany and he's teaching, and the two sisters, Mary and Martha. Mary is at his feet, just soaking up every word. And then Martha's in the kitchen trying to get dinner ready, and she comes out and she's a little pissed off, and she says, "Hey, come on, the off, the women, were do all this was this was another picture of a woman as a disciple, which was radical anyway, because the women should be in the kitchen, doing all that. And she says, come on, I need some help. And he said, let her be. Uh, let her be, Martha. He said, Mary's got the better part. Well, he really isn't telling her she's wrong. Martha and Mary are the two sides of our brain. Martha's the doer, left brain. Mary is the listener, this the sacred part of it. We have both. We both have a Martha and Mary inside of us because we have a left brain and a right brain. And when he said it was the better part, he just meant it's the part that should be primary. In other words, uh, your soul's journey is the ultimate to become healed of all the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, as Shakespeare said, as Hamlet said. See, so it's a question of who's the master, who's the servant. And if you're on the soul journey, the soul is, and I'm in my 45th day of sitting with my big brother Jim, who departed. He was a traveler. Now his soul went on 45 days ago. Uh, and Tibetans are saying he's going through this intermediate thing. His essence didn't die, the body died. No dead people in Tibet, just dead bodies. And I thank the Tibetans for really giving me a different view. And so his essence is going on. So I sit with him every day, and we have a kind of conversation. Today's was very interesting, but I'm sitting with him for 49 days. That's just a Tibetan ballpark figure of how long it takes to come back into a body of some sort. Yeah, and so the soul. I mean, you can make all these guys they're trying to make more billions of dollars, and all it'll be a total waste when they're gripping the sheets heading on, because none of you can't take it with you, and it doesn't mean anything at that point. Ask Debbie in when she's going through cancer. Uh, the body, the body will be left behind. The mind, the left brain will be left behind. My mother lost her mind, but she was still in there, you see. Pema told me that, changed my life. She said, your mother's lost her mind, but her heart's still fine. You can communicate to her heart to heart. She taught me Tonglen. So we need both. We need Martha, the Martha side of us and the Mary side of us, but the Mary side is the better part. In other words, it's the master. If your mind is working, it's not working for the wholeness and healing your body, your body, mind, and soul. It's misplaced. So now we'll get to the last part. Growing awareness. That your life should be a growing awareness, and awareness again is the right brain, thinking in the left brain, awareness in the right brain. Awareness is the bigger of the two. In meditation, in a minute, we'll just go into silent meditation, and you'll be sitting in awareness for a second, and then all of a sudden you'll become aware that you're thinking about something. I'm thinking about tonight's football game. And then I'll just bring myself back. I'll let go of that thought and bring myself back. Awareness is the right brain, the soul connecting with the big picture, because we're going to go into that big picture. So this path of healing with the soul is a path of growing awareness. Now, Jung said one time, he said, you know what our greatest sin is? Because he was well aware of all the theology, about the sin of in the Garden of Eden and stuff. He says, our greatest sin is lack of awareness, mindlessness. You could say soullessness. I mean, this is a pretty soulless world. Look at politics for a minute. So lack of awareness is our greatest sin. But he said, we have our greatest blessing, which is awareness, that we can shift over. We can have awareness, like I say in the hokey pokey, you make awareness the master and thinking the servant. It's exactly what we're talking about, you see. Awareness is bigger than thinking. Awareness is bigger than the bottom line. See, Now, just one last thing on awareness. Jung even he parsed awareness into two parts. He said there's the sun-like awareness, like the sun. Uh, that would he's talking about the left brain there, knowledge, and that leads to a sense of uniqueness. You can actually try to understand that you can see the difference between things, and you can see we're not all like a blob, we don't just melt into a big pool of vanilla and we're all the same. No, where each has a unique uh, each of us has a unique contribution to the whole, and so the left brain is important. We need both. The left brain, through reason and whatever, can show us the uniqueness of life uh, and of each soul. Now, the right brain kind of awareness he called moon-like. And notice the sun and the moon. That's the masculine and the feminine. The sun and the moon, the masculine and the feminine. The moon-like aware. The moon in the dark night is that kind of awareness is more for going into the dark, into the mystery, and where we can gain knowledge from the left brain. The right brain leads us to wisdom. Different thing. T.S. Eliot at the juncture of when World War II is starting, he said, "Where's the wisdom lost in the knowledge? Where's the knowledge lost in the information?" You can say now, where's the information lost in just the raw data? Yeah, so wisdom is something bigger. It connects knowledge to healing, to wholeness, you see. So there are two kinds. And so he's saying, really, well, we need the awareness of both brains, the consciousness of both brains, a growing consciousness. And awareness is the missing part. That will lead us to oneness. So uniqueness, oneness, they're not opposites. They're polarities that need to be integrated together. One of the interesting things about Jung is, besides dreams and active imagination, he was very interested in mandalas, which we use quite a bit in this group. I've got a mom. Look at the mandala on the floor here. The 4 points and of the compass, north, south, east, and west. And the mandala integrates. It's actually a place where you can. It's a way of looking at the world that you don't see things as opposites like birth and death. You don't see them as opposites. You see them as sort of um, polarities that are joined, just like you don't see inside and outside as opposites. There are polarities that can be conjoined or integrated, you see. And so he uses the mandala for that, which I use often just to teach. I'm always looking at the mandala here, and he got that from Tibetan Buddhists. But everybody has them. Indigenous Americans had the medicine wheel. Okay, um, even the Aborigines from Australia had a form of the mandala, and then in Christianity, there's the rose window in Chartres and various places. This picture of the oneness radiating out from the center, you see. Now, uh, Jung died in 1961, and carved in stone over the door to his tower where he would live to at the end of his life. He built a tower with his own hands. Uh, and on his gravestone, it was etched in Latin, had his name in it, but then he had this in Latin, he had words there, and translated, they said, bidden or not bidden, God is present. He had it in Latin. He lived in many languages, many worlds, but bidden or unbidden, God is present. So whether you believe in God or not, whether you're calling God or you could care less about God, doesn't affect the fact that bidden or unbidden, God is present. That was his last words. He wanted that on his tombstone. So he was a guy who really was trying to integrate um, the divine into the journey. And for that, he gave us some basic language. We'll do more on this. We've got a lot of people that are language teachers in the language of the soul. But I think for now that's enough. And you can definitely spend some time reading Jung. Joseph Campbell introduces the portable Jung, and Campbell was totally moved by Jung.